A millionaire found an abandoned blind girl on the street and took her home. Months later, he was speechless to learn who the girl's father was. Rain lashed the deserted streets of Oakhaven, a small town nestled amidst lush green mountains. On that tempestuous night, two destinies were about to intertwine irrevocably. Arthur Miller, 55, watched the raindrops slide down the window of his limousine, his face etched with worry and loneliness. The man who had built an empire from scratch now found himself surrounded by everything but what truly mattered. "Sir, are you sure you don't want me to drive you straight to the mansion?" his chauffeur, James Deese, asked, glancing at him with concern through the rearview mirror. Arthur shook his head. "No, James, circle downtown one more time. I need to think." The limousine glided silently through the narrow streets, passing modest homes that starkly contrasted with the vehicle's opulence. Arthur observed the lit windows, glimpsing families gathered inside, safe from the storm. A pang of loneliness struck him. Suddenly, a flicker of movement on the sidewalk caught his eye. "James, stop the car." The limousine braked abruptly. Through the sheets of rain, Arthur saw a small figure huddled beneath a faded awning. Without hesitation, he exited the car, the downpour instantly soaking his expensive suit. Approaching cautiously, Arthur was met with a sight that stole his breath. A young girl, no older than 8, trembled in the cold. Her vacant, unfocused eyes revealed her blindness. "Hello," Arthur said softly, kneeling beside her. "Are you okay? Where are your parents?" The girl turned towards his voice, her sightless eyes searching the empty air. I don't know. Daddy told me to wait here. He'll come back." Arthur's heart ached. How long had this child been waiting alone? "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Clara," she whispered. In that instant, something within Arthur shifted. Years of detached business decisions and self-imposed isolation seemed to melt away in the unforgiving rain. "Clara, it's too cold and wet out here. Why don't you come with me? We can try to find your father together." The girl's hesitation was tangible. Arthur noticed a locket around her neck, a detail that would later prove critical. "Don't worry, I'm a friend," he reassured her, extending a hand. To his surprise, Clara reached out, her small, cold fingers grasping his. Leading Clara to the limousine, Arthur felt the weight of his decision. Should he call the authorities? Take her to a hospital? The implications of bringing a lost child home weighed heavily on him. James, his chauffeur, watched with a mixture of shock and concern. "Sir, are you certain about this?" Arthur hesitated briefly, then nodded resolutely. "To the mansion, James, and call Dr. Smith. Tell him it's an emergency." As the limousine pulled away, Arthur couldn't fathom how this encounter would alter his life's course. Who was this mysterious, blind girl? Why had she been abandoned? And why did he feel such an inexplicable connection to her? Back at the Miller estate, lights blazed to life, staff were roused from sleep, and a chain of events was set into motion. Meanwhile, somewhere in the city, a man watched the relentless rain, a heavy secret weighing on his heart, oblivious to the imminent collision with Arthur Miller's world. The storm raged outside, but within the limousine, a pregnant silence hung between the solitary millionaire and the abandoned blind girl. On that fateful night, destinies were sealed, secrets buried, and a journey of redemption, forgiveness, and an improbable love story had just begun. As the mansion appeared on the horizon, a stately silhouette against the turbulent sky, Arthur glanced at Clara, asleep by his side. He didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. His life would never be the same. And so, under the cover of a stormy night, a new chapter began, a chapter that would shake Oakhaven to its core and unearth long-hidden truths. Dawn found Arthur Miller sitting by Clara's bedside, his weary eyes fixed on the sleeping child. The night had been long, punctuated by her soft whimpers and his clumsy attempts at comfort. For the first time in decades, the formidable businessman felt utterly out of his depth. "Sir?" Mary, the housekeeper's gentle voice, interrupted his thoughts. "Breakfast is ready, and the nurse you requested has arrived." Arthur nodded, rising stiffly. His muscles protested after a restless night. "Thank you, Mary. Please show Nurse Susan to Clara's room and ask her to wait. I'll be down shortly." As Mary left, Clara stirred, her unseeing eyes fluttering open. Where am I?" she asked, her voice trembling with fear. "It's all right, Clara," Arthur reassured her, his voice softer than it had ever been in a boardroom. "You're safe now. Remember me? I'm Arthur, the man who brought you home last night." Recognition flickered across Clara's face, followed by a wave of sadness. "Daddy didn't come back, did he?" Arthur's heart tightened. "No, sweetheart. But don't worry, we'll take care of you here." The following hours were a flurry of activity. Nurse Susan, a capable woman with a kind face, arrived with a medical bag and a determined air. She examined Clara thoroughly, gently inquiring about her health and history. "Mr. Miller," Nurse Susan said, drawing him aside after the examination. "Clara appears to be healthy considering the circumstances. However, she'll require specialized care and, above all, stability and love." Arthur swallowed, the full impact of his impulsive decision settling upon him. "I'll do whatever's necessary," he vowed, the words directed as much to himself as to the nurse. The ensuing days were a roller coaster of emotions and challenges. Arthur, accustomed to delegating and making swift decisions, found himself learning to guide Clara through the mansion, describing colors and shapes, even attempting to prepare simple meals, much to Mary's amused horror. A week after Clara's arrival, Arthur sat in his study poring over neglected reports, when a soft knock interrupted him. It was Clara, led by Nurse Susan. "Mr. Miller," Nurse Susan smiled. "Clara wanted to show you something." Shyly, Clara extended a drawing. It was a vibrant explosion of colors, shapeless to Arthur's eyes, yet clearly meaningful to the girl. "It's beautiful, Clara," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "What is it?" "It's us," she replied, her face lighting up. "You come to me, Nurse Susan and Mary, our family." The word family struck Arthur like a thunderbolt. Memories of his own lonely childhood flooded his mind. An only child of distant parents, he had always yearned for connection, for belonging. This longing, buried beneath layers of ambition and professional success, now resurfaced with unexpected force. That evening, as he helped Clara prepare for bed, Arthur noticed something glinting around her neck. "What's that, sweetheart?" Clara touched the object tenderly. "My locket. Mommy gave it to me before she went away." Curious, Arthur asked to see it. Opening the locket, his heart nearly stopped. Inside was a picture of a young, beautiful woman with kind eyes and a radiant smile. A woman he knew all too well, Elena Rodriguez, his former employee who had mysteriously vanished 5 years prior. Arthur snapped the locket shut, his mind racing. How was Elena connected to Clara, and why had the girl been abandoned? "But is everything all right?" Clara asked, sensing his sudden tension. "Yes, sweetheart," he replied, forcing a light tone. "It's a very pretty locket. Now, time for bed." Later, alone in his study, Arthur stared at the phone. After several minutes of hesitation, he dialed a number. "Hello, Charles, it's Arthur Miller. I need you to look into something for me." With utmost discretion, as he gave instructions to his trusted private investigator, Arthur couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to open Pandora's box. What was the connection between Elena, Clara, and the mysterious absent father? And how did it all tie back to him? Days turned into weeks, and the Miller mansion came alive. Laughter echoed through the once silent halls, and even the long-neglected gardens began to bloom under Clara and Mary's care. Arthur observed these changes with a mixture of joy and apprehension. On one hand, he felt more alive than he had in years, a void he hadn't realized existed now being filled. On the other, the shadows of the past and the uncertainties of the future loomed large. One afternoon, as Clara practiced reading Braille with Nurse Susan, Arthur received a call from Charles. "Boss, I've got some information on Elena Rodriguez." The investigator's voice was tense. "But you're not going to like what I found." A chill ran down Arthur's spine. "Tell me everything, Charles." As Charles revealed his findings, Arthur's face paled. The unfolding story was a tangled web of corporate secrets, betrayal, and tragedy. and at the center of it all stood Arthur Miller himself. Hanging up the phone, Arthur felt sick to his stomach. Charles' revelations cast a new light on Clara's abandonment, and the implications were devastating. Just then, a knock on the door startled him. It was Mary, her face etched with concern. "Mr. Miller, there's a social worker here. She says it's about Clara." Panic seized Arthur. He wasn't ready for this. Not now, when he had just uncovered the shocking truth about Clara's past. "Tell her I'll be there in a moment," he replied, struggling to maintain his composure. As he prepared to face the social worker, Arthur knew he was at a crossroads. The decisions he made in the next few moments would not only shape Clara's future, but also unearth secrets that could destroy everything he had built. Taking a deep breath, he stood up. It was time to face the consequences of his past actions and fight for the future he now desperately desired, a future with Clara. Arthur Miller's office, once a sanctuary of power and calculated decisions, now felt suffocating. Across from him, Sarah Johnson, the social worker, observed him with piercing eyes, as if she could see through his carefully constructed facade. "Mr. Miller," Sarah began, her voice professional yet tinged with suspicion, "I'm here to discuss Clara Baker's situation. I understand you found her 2 weeks ago." Arthur nodded, trying to maintain his composure. "Yes, she was alone, abandoned during a storm. I couldn't just leave her there." Sarah made a note on her pad. "And why didn't you notify the authorities immediately?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. Arthur felt a bead of sweat trickle down his back. "I wanted to make sure she was safe and comfortable first. These past weeks have been about helping her adjust." "I see," Sarah replied, her tone suggesting she didn't entirely believe him. "Mr. Miller, do you have any information about Clara's background, her parents?" Arthur's heart pounded. The image of the locket with Elena Rodriguez's picture flashed in his mind. He knew he should be honest, but the fear of losing Clara and of confronting his own past paralyzed him. "No, I'm afraid I don't know anything beyond what Clara has told me," he lied, hating himself for it. Sarah studied him for a long moment before continuing. "Well, I have some information that may be relevant. Clara's full name is Clara Elena Baker. Her mother, Elena Rodriguez, disappeared 5 years ago. Her father, Robert Baker, was last seen 2 weeks ago, coinciding with the day you found Clara." Arthur felt as if the ground had shifted beneath his feet. Elena Rodriguez, Robert Baker. Names from the past that now threatened his present and future. "That's surprising," he managed to say, struggling to keep his voice steady. "Mr. Miller," Sarah leaned forward, her eyes fixed on his. "Is there anything else you'd like to tell me? Any information could be crucial to Clara's well-being." For a moment, Arthur considered revealing everything. The locket, his connection to Eleanor, Charles, recent discoveries. But fear held him back. "No, I'm sorry. I wish I could be of more help," Sarah sighed, clearly dissatisfied with his answer. "Very well. For now, due to the unusual circumstances, Clara can remain in your care. But I'll be monitoring the situation closely. I expect your full cooperation in the next stages of the investigation." After Sarah left, Arthur slumped back in his chair, exhausted. The weight of his secrets and lies crushed him. He knew he was treading on dangerous ground, but the fear of losing Clara, the only person who had brought light into his solitary life in years, was greater than his sense of duty. A soft knock on the door pulled him from his dark thoughts. It was Clara, guided by Nurse Susan. "Arthur," Clara's voice was hesitant, "are you okay? You seem sad." His heart melted. How could this blind little girl see through him so easily? "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just a little tired." Clara approached, her hand finding his with surprising accuracy. "You know, when I'm sad, Mommy used to tell me stories. Would you like me to tell you one?" Arthur felt tears welling up in his eyes. "I'd love that, Clara." As Clara narrated a whimsical story about a lonely king who finds friendship in a small bird, Arthur couldn't help but see the parallels to his own life. He was the lonely king, and Clara, the bird who had brought joy to his empty kingdom. Later that night, after putting Clara to bed, Arthur found himself back in his study, this time staring at an old photograph. In it, a much younger Elena Rodriguez smiled alongside a group of employees, including a serious-looking Robert Baker. And there he was, Arthur Miller, at the center of the picture, the proud CEO of a rising company. Long-suppressed memories began to surface. Elena, brilliant and ambitious, quickly climbing the corporate ladder. Robert, quiet but efficient, always working behind the scenes. And him, Arthur, blinded by ambition and power, making choices that now haunted him. A sudden impulse led him to pick up the phone. "Charles, I need you to dig deeper into Robert Baker. Find out everything you can about his last movements before he disappeared." As he gave further instructions to Charles, Arthur couldn't shake the feeling that he was pulling at the threads of a complex web. Each new piece of information seemed to lead to more questions, more secrets. The following days were a whirlwind of conflicting emotions for Arthur. On one hand, his bond with Clara grew stronger with each passing day. He found himself cherishing the simple moments, reading stories to her, listening to her laughter during music lessons, feeling the confident touch of her small hand in his as they walked through the gardens. On the other hand, Charles' investigation began to paint a disturbing picture. Robert Baker had been involved in a series of suspicious financial transactions in the months leading up to his disappearance. Even more alarming, there were indications that he had been in contact with Arthur's former business rivals. One afternoon, while watching Clara play in the garden with Mary, Arthur received an unexpected call from Charles. "Boss, you need to see this. I found something on the city's security cameras. It's about the night you found Clara." Minutes later, Arthur sat in his study, his eyes glued to his computer screen. The video showed a hooded figure leaving Clara on the street, moments before Arthur had found her. As the figure turned briefly, Arthur felt his blood run cold. Even with the grainy footage, he recognized the face, Robert Baker. The revelation hit him like a physical blow. Robert had deliberately abandoned his own daughter. But why? And how did this connect to Elena's disappearance years ago? As Arthur struggled to process this new information, he heard a sound coming from the hallway. Quickly closing his laptop, he stepped out of the study, only to find Clara standing in the middle of the hallway, silent tears streaming down her face. "Clara, what's wrong, sweetheart?" The girl looked up at him, her unseeing eyes filled with pain. I heard you talking about my daddy. Did he leave me on purpose?" Arthur's heart broke. He knelt down, pulling Clara into a tight embrace. "Oh, Clara, I don't know all the details yet, but I promise I'll find out the truth. And no matter what happens, you'll always have a home here with me." As he comforted the girl, Arthur knew he had reached a point of no return. He could no longer hide the truth, from Clara, from Sarah, or from himself. It was time to confront the past, no matter how painful. With Clara in his arms, Arthur made a decision. He would uncover the whole truth about Elena and Robert, and he would do whatever it took to protect the girl who had become the center of his world. Even if it meant confronting the ghosts of his own past and risking everything he had built. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with painful revelations and impossible choices. But looking at Clara, Arthur knew it would be worth it. For the first time in his life, he had something, someone, to fight for that was greater than himself. And so, in that quiet hallway, holding the blind girl who had changed his life, Arthur Miller prepared for the battle that lay ahead. A battle for truth, for redemption, and above all, for the love of a family he never knew he needed. Morning sunlight filtered through the curtains of Clara's room, where Arthur found her already awake, her fingers tracing the raised dots on a braille book. His heart ached as he recalled the previous night, the pain in her eyes upon learning the truth about her father. "Good morning, Clara," he said softly, approaching her bedside. She turned towards his voice and a small smile gracing her lips. "Good morning, Arthur. Did you sleep well?" Her innocent concern nearly undid him. How could she worry about him after everything? "Yes, sweetheart. And you?" Clara hesitated. "I had some bad dreams, but..." She reached out, her hand finding his with unerring accuracy. "I remembered you're here now." Her simple words solidified Arthur's resolve. He sat on the edge of the bed, gently holding her hand. "Clara, About last night. I want you to know that I'm doing everything I can to understand what happened to your parents. And no matter what we discover, you'll always have a home here with me." Clara's blind eyes seemed to pierce his soul. "Do you promise?" "I promise," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. The rest of the morning unfolded with a routine that had become familiar in recent weeks. Nurse Susan arrived for Clara's daily therapy and specialized education session, while Arthur retreated to his study, determined to unravel more of the mystery surrounding Clara's family. Hours passed as he reviewed Charles' reports, connecting dots and discovering patterns that had previously gone unnoticed. Helena Rodriguez, Clara's mother and Arthur's former employee, had been a rising star in the company before her mysterious disappearance 5 years ago. Robert Baker, the absent father, had a history of financial troubles and shady connections. A pattern began to emerge, one that made Arthur's stomach churn. There seemed to be a link between Elena's disappearance, Robert's suspicious activities, and a major corporate project that Arthur had personally overseen years ago. His phone rang, interrupting his grim thoughts. It was Sarah Johnson, the social worker. "Mr. Miller," her voice sounded tense, "we need to talk. There's been a new development in Clara's case. Can I come by this afternoon?" A chill ran down Arthur's spine. "Of course, Sarah. I'll be expecting you." After hanging up, Arthur rose and walked to the window. Outside, in the garden, he could see Clara with Mary, the housekeeper. They were planting flowers. Clara's small hands carefully guided by Mary as they placed the seedlings in the earth. The scene was so peaceful, so normal, that for a moment Arthur almost forgot the secrets and dangers that surrounded them. A soft sound made him turn. Nurse Susan stood at the study door, her face a mask of concern. "Mr. Miller," she began hesitantly, "there's something I need to discuss with you about Clara." Arthur nodded, gesturing for her to enter. "So what is it, Susan?" The nurse hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I've noticed something in our recent sessions. Clara, she seems to have repressed memories. Sometimes, during our activities, she mentions things about her mother, about a secret room, and about loud, frightening voices. I believe she may have witnessed something traumatic before she lost her sight." Susan's words struck Arthur like a lightning bolt. A secret room, frightening voices. Could this be related to Elena's disappearance? "Thank you for telling me this, Susan. Please continue to observe and keep me informed of any new developments." As soon as Susan left, Arthur found himself caught in a whirlwind of emotions and theories. Each new piece of information seemed to open a Pandora's box of possibilities and dangers. The afternoon arrived quickly, and with it, Sarah Johnson. The social worker entered Arthur's office with a grave expression. "Mr. Miller," she began without preamble, "we've discovered something alarming. There's evidence that Robert Baker was involved in illegal activities before his disappearance. And there are indications that these activities may be connected to your company." Arthur felt the world spin around him. His mind raced back to the corporate project he had been investigating earlier. Could there be a connection? "Sarah, he began, but was interrupted by a scream from the garden. Both rushed to the window. Outside, Clara was on the ground, Mary kneeling beside her. The girl was trembling violently, her eyes wide with terror. Without a second thought, Arthur raced to the garden, Sarah close behind. When they arrived, Clara was in Mary's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. "What happened?" Arthur asked, his voice shaking with concern. Mary, pale and frightened, replied, "I don't know for sure, sir. We were planting flowers, and suddenly she started screaming about a dark room and angry voices. She mentioned her mother's name, Elena." Arthur and Sarah exchanged worried glances. Clearly, there was more to Clara's story than either of them had imagined. Carefully, Arthur lifted Clara into his arms, feeling her cling to him as if her life depended on it. "It's okay, sweetheart, you're safe now. I'm here." As he carried Clara back to the house, Arthur knew he had reached a point of no return. The secrets of the past were emerging, threatening not only his reputation and his company, but also Clara's safety and well-being. Looking at Sarah, who followed them with a determined expression, Arthur made a decision. It was time to stop hiding the truth. For Clara, he would face his past, no matter how painful or dangerous it might be. "Sarah," he said, his voice firm despite the tremor in his hands, "there's something I need to tell you, about Elena, about my company, and about what really might have happened to Clara's family." The social worker nodded gravely, understanding the seriousness of the moment. Together they entered the house, ready to unearth long-buried truths and face the consequences that would follow. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the Miller mansion. A new chapter was about to begin, one that would test the newly formed bonds between Arthur and Clara, and one that could change their lives forever. Arthur's office, once a sanctuary of power and cold calculations, now felt stifling. Stacks of documents covered his desk, each page a piece of the puzzle that was Elena Rodriguez's past. Arthur had spent sleepless nights delving into old company files, police reports, and personal correspondence. One name stood out amidst the chaos of information: Robert Baker. Arthur leaned back in his chair, memories flooding his mind. Robert, a quiet and efficient employee, always working behind the scenes. How could Arthur have been so blind? A flashback transported him back 5 years. The office was the same, but the atmosphere was tense, charged with unspoken accusations. "Mr. Miller, you can't ignore this," Robert's voice echoed in his memory, trembling with anger and desperation. "Elena discovered something big, and now she's gone." The Arthur of the past, arrogant in his position of power, had dismissed Robert's concerns with a wave of his hand. "Mr. Baker, I understand you're upset about your friend's disappearance, but insinuating that the company has something to do with it is a serious accusation. Very serious." The scene dissolved, replaced by another, Robert being escorted out of the building, his belongings in a box, his face a mask of defeat and betrayal. Back in the present, Arthur felt the weight of guilt crushing his chest. How could he have been so callous, so blind? A soft knock on the door brought him back to reality. It was Sarah Johnson, the social worker, her face a mixture of determination and concern. "Mr. Miller," she began, sitting down across from him, "we need to talk about your findings. The authorities need to be informed." Arthur nodded slowly, knowing she was right, but dreading the consequences. "I know, Sarah. But there's more at stake here than just my reputation or the company's." Clara, as if summoned by her name, a piercing scream cut through the air, coming from upstairs. Both jumped to their feet, racing towards Clara's room. They found the girl sitting up in bed, trembling, her unfocused eyes wide with terror. Nurse Susan was trying to calm her, but to no avail. "Tie the dark room," Clara sobbed. "Mommy screaming, hey, bad men, Daddy falling." Arthur rushed to her side, gathering her into his arms. "It's all right, sweetheart. It was just a bad dream. You're safe now." As he soothed the girl, Arthur exchanged meaningful glances with Sarah. Clara's nightmares weren't just the products of a child's imagination. They were fragments of traumatic memories, pieces of the puzzle they were trying to assemble. Hours later, with Clara finally asleep, Arthur and Sarah returned to the study. The atmosphere was somber, heavy with unspoken revelations. "Mr. Miller," Sarah began, her voice low but firm, "what exactly did Eleanor discover that was so dangerous?" Arthur sighed deeply, feeling the weight of years of secrets. "The Aurora Project. It was supposed to be revolutionary, clean energy that would change the world. But Elena, she discovered something. Something that frightened her enough to want to expose everything." He paused, recalling his last interactions with Eleanor. Her frightened eyes, her insistence on speaking to him privately. How foolish he had been to ignore her. "And then she disappeared," Sarah concluded, her voice laced with unspoken accusation. Arthur nodded, the guilt evident in every line of his face. "I should have listened. I should have paid attention, but I was so focused on the project's success, on the glory it would bring." Sarah observed him for a long moment, as if assessing him. "Mr. Miller, I need you to be completely honest with me now. Did you have any direct involvement in Elena's disappearance?" The question hung in the air, heavy and accusatory. Arthur felt his heart race, his mouth go dry. "No," he finally answered, his voice hoarse. but my negligence, my obsession with the company's success, that may have contributed to what happened to her. Just then, Arthur's phone rang, breaking the tension. It was Charles, his private investigator. "Boss," Charles' voice was urgent. "You need to see this. I found something in the old company archives, an incident report, filed incorrectly. It seems there was an accident in the lab the night Elena disappeared." Arthur felt his blood run cold. "What kind of accident, Charles?" "The report is vague, but it mentions a small explosion, damage control." "Boss, this doesn't sound like an accident." The revelation hit Arthur like a punch to the gut. Elena hadn't simply disappeared. Something had happened to her, something terrible, and everything pointed to a cover-up within his own company. Hanging up the phone, Arthur looked at Sarah, his expression a mixture of horror and determination. "Sarah, the situation is worse than we thought. Elena, she may have been murdered." The silence that followed was heavy, laden with terrible implications. Sarah was the first to break it. "Mr. Miller, we have no choice now. We need to take this to the authorities immediately." Arthur nodded slowly, the reality of his situation finally hitting him with full force. His empire, built over decades, was about to crumble. His reputation, his freedom, everything was at stake. But looking at the picture of Clara on his desk, Arthur felt a resolve forming in his heart. No matter the personal cost, he would do whatever it took to uncover the truth and protect that innocent girl. "You're right, Sarah," he said finally, his voice firm despite the tremor in his hands. "It's time to face the consequences of my actions. For Eleanor, for Robert, and above all, for Clara." As he prepared to make the call that would change his life forever, Arthur knew the road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in years, he felt at peace. The truth, no matter how painful, was the only path to redemption. And so, in the shadows of his study, with the weight of long-held secrets finally lifted, Arthur Miller prepared to face the dawn of a new day, a day of truths, consequences, and perhaps, eventually, redemption. Morning arrived at the Miller mansion with a deceptive tranquility. Arthur, exhausted after a night of confessions and planning with Sarah, stood on the porch, watching Clara play in the garden under Nurse Susan's watchful eye. The apparent peace starkly contrasted with the emotional turmoil churning within him. The sound of tires on the driveway shattered the silence. An unfamiliar car screeched to a halt, and from it emerged a figure Arthur hadn't seen in years, but instantly recognized: Robert Baker. Time had not been kind to Robert. His face was lined with worry, and his eyes carried the weight of years of suffering. He strode towards Arthur with determined steps, ignoring the security guard's protests. "Where is my daughter, Miller?" Robert's voice was hoarse, thick with suppressed emotion. Arthur felt his heart race. "Robert, please, let's talk civilly. Clara is—" "Civilly?" Robert interrupted, his voice rising. "How dare you talk about civility after everything you've done?" The commotion attracted Clara's attention, and she turned her head towards the voices. "Daddy," she called out hesitantly. Time seemed to freeze. Robert looked at his daughter, his eyes filling with tears. "Clara," he whispered. Clara took an uncertain step towards the voice. "Daddy, is that really you?" Robert rushed towards his daughter, engulfing her in a tight embrace. "Yes, my little one, it's me. I'm here now." Arthur watched the scene unfold, a whirlwind of emotions consuming him. Relief that Clara had finally been reunited with her father, guilt for the years of separation, and a growing fear of what was to come. Sarah, drawn by the commotion, joined them in the garden. "Mr. Baker," she began, her voice professional but gentle. "I'm Sarah Johnson, the social worker assigned to Clara's case. We need to talk about—" "There's nothing to talk about," Robert interrupted, still holding his daughter close. "I'm taking Clara home now." "Wait," Arthur intervened. "Robert, please, there's so much we need to discuss. About Elena, about what really happened." The mention of Elena's name seemed to ignite a fire in Robert's eyes. He turned to Arthur, his expression a mixture of pain and rage. "You have the audacity to mention her name? After everything you did?" Clara, sensing the tension, clung tighter to her father. "Daddy, what's going on? Why are you angry with Arthur?" Robert hesitated, looking at his daughter with an anguished expression. Clara, there's so much you don't know. This man, he's the reason your mother is gone. The words hit Arthur like a punch to the gut. Robert, that's not fair. I didn't know. Didn't know, Robert exploded. Elena tried to warn you. She discovered the truth about the Aurora project, about how it was being used for military purposes, and you ignored her. Arthur felt the weight of years of guilt crushing him. I made mistakes, Robert. Terrible mistakes, but I'm trying to make things right now. Sarah intervened, her voice firm. Gentlemen, please, we have a child here who needs stability. We need to resolve this civilly. Clara, who had been silent, suddenly spoke up. I remember loud voices, Mommy crying, and a dark room. Everyone turned to her, surprised. Robert knelt beside his daughter. What else do you remember, sweetheart? Clara frowned, concentrating. There was a man. It wasn't you, Daddy. He was talking about a project, about secrets. Mommy yelled at him. Arthur and Robert exchanged shocked glances. Clara, Arthur asked gently, do you remember who this man was? The girl shook her head. I didn't see his face, but his voice, it was scary. Robert hugged Clara protectively. That's why I had to leave you, my little one. They were after us. I thought you'd be safer without me. A wave of understanding washed over Arthur. Robert, you didn't abandon Clara. You were protecting her. Robert looked at Arthur, years of anger and distrust slowly giving way to a resigned weariness. What do you want, Miller? Why are you helping Clara now? Because I'm trying to atone for my mistakes, Arthur answered honestly, and because Clara deserves to know the truth about what happened to her mother. Sarah, who had been observing intently, spoke up. Gentlemen, I suggest we continue this conversation inside. Clara needs to rest, and we all need to discuss the next steps calmly. As they walked towards the house, Clara held Robert's hand with one hand and Arthur's with the other. The simple gesture didn't go unnoticed by either man. Once inside the living room, with Clara resting in her room under Nurse Susan's care, Arthur, Robert and Sarah prepared for a difficult but necessary conversation. Robert, Arthur began, his voice heavy with regret, I know I can't undo the past, but I'm committed to uncovering the truth about what happened to Elena and ensuring Clara's safety. Robert studied him for a long moment before replying, I don't trust you, Miller, but for Clara's sake, I'm willing to listen. Sarah nodded approvingly. That's a start. Now, let's discuss how we can work together to protect Clara and unravel the mystery behind Elena's disappearance. As the three adults prepared for a long and difficult discussion, upstairs, Clara clutched her locket tightly, a soft smile playing on her lips. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was close to understanding her past and, perhaps, having a future with a complete family. The road ahead would be challenging, filled with painful revelations and unexpected obstacles. But in that moment, at the Miller mansion, a fragile hope began to bloom. The hope that the truth, however difficult, would finally come to light, bringing with it the possibility of healing and redemption for everyone involved. Arthur's office, once a symbol of power and success, now resembled a war room. Maps, documents, and photographs covered every available surface. In the midst of this organized chaos, Arthur, Robert, and Sarah worked tirelessly, each bringing a different piece to the puzzle that was Elena's disappearance. It starts here, Robert said, pointing to a photograph of Elena. His voice trembled slightly as he spoke of his lost wife. Elena discovered something about the Aurora project, something that frightened her enough to want to expose everything. Arthur nodded grimly. She tried to warn me. I didn't listen. A heavy silence fell over the room, broken only by the soft scratching of Sarah's pen as she furiously took notes. Robert closed his eyes, lost in painful memories. After Elena disappeared, I became obsessed with finding the truth. I lost my job, my home. The scene dissolved into a flashback. Robert, disheveled and haggard, sifted through documents in a small, dilapidated apartment. Photographs of Elena and newspaper clippings plastered the walls. In the crib beside him, a baby Clara cried, hungry. I'll find out what happened to your mother, my love, Robert murmured, tears in his eyes. I promise. Back in the present, Robert continued. I knew they were watching us. I had to leave Clara to protect her. It was the hardest decision of my life. Sarah, who had remained silent, finally spoke. Mr. Baker, I understand your pain, but abandoning Clara... I didn't abandon her, Robert exclaimed, his voice breaking. I left her where I knew she would be found. I had no choice. Arthur, feeling the weight of his own guilt, intervened. Sarah, I believe Robert. The circumstances were extraordinary. At that moment, a soft knock on the door interrupted their conversation. It was Nurse Susan, with Clara in tow. Try to excuse the interruption, Susan said, but Clara insisted on seeing you. Clara entered hesitantly, her unfocused eyes searching for the familiar voices. Daddy, Arthur. Both men moved to reach her, stopping abruptly as they realized each other's actions. Clara, sensing the tension, frowned. Why are you fighting? She asked, her voice small and worried. Robert knelt beside his daughter. We're not fighting, sweetheart. We're just trying to understand some complicated things. Arthur, watching the interaction, felt a pang of jealousy, guilt. He had grown more attached to Clara than he had realized. Sarah, ever focused, redirected the conversation. Clara, is there anything you can tell us about the night you became separated from your father? The girl hesitated, her brow furrowed in concentration. I remember loud voices, Daddy shouting at a man, and a name. Everyone in the room held their breath. What name, sweetheart? Robert asked gently. Victor, Clara replied. Someone named Victor. Arthur felt his blood run cold. Victor Thompson was his vice president at the time, directly responsible for the Aurora project. My God, Arthur murmured, the realization hitting him like a thunderbolt. Victor was involved in all of this. Robert stood up abruptly. You knew this all along? No, Arthur protested. I swear, Robert, I'm as shocked as you are. Sarah intervened quickly. Gentlemen, please, we have a crucial lead here. We need to focus. In the days that followed, the investigation intensified. Arthur used his contacts to unearth old records, while Robert shared details of his own clandestine investigation. The picture that emerged was grim. The Aurora project, originally conceived for clean energy, had been secretly adapted for military applications. Elena had discovered the truth and threatened to expose everything. She was a threat to them, Robert said bitterly. To you, to Victor, to the whole damn company. Arthur, feeling the weight of years of negligence, could barely meet Robert's gaze. I should have realized. I should have paid closer attention. The tension between the two men was palpable, only partially eased by the presence of Clara, who seemed to float between them, seeking comfort from both her biological father and the man who had taken her in. It was Sarah who finally connected the final dots. Look at this, she said, pointing to a financial report. Large sums transferred to an offshore account, days after Eleanor's disappearance. Arthur examined the document, his face paling. That signature, it's Victor's. The revelation landed like a bombshell. Victor Thompson, Arthur's right-hand man, was directly involved in Elena's disappearance and possibly her death. You let this happen, Robert accused, his voice trembling with barely contained rage. Your negligence, your greed. I know, Arthur interrupted, his voice broken. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make amends for it. Clara, sensing the charged atmosphere, approached, touching each man's arm. Please don't fight, she pleaded. Oh, Mommy wouldn't want that. Her simple, truthful words seemed to dissipate some of the tension. Robert and Arthur exchanged glances, a silent understanding passing between them. What do we do now? Robert asked wearily. Arthur took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his responsibility. We go to the police. With everything. It's time for the truth to come out, no matter the consequences for me or the company. Sarah nodded approvingly. It's the right thing to do. As they prepared to take the next step, Arthur looked at Clara, then at Robert. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with painful revelations and potential dangers. But for the first time in years, Arthur felt he was doing the right thing. The truth, however painful, was the only path to redemption. And perhaps, in the process of unraveling this dark mystery, they could find a way to heal. For Elena, for Clara, and for themselves. Arthur's decision to take the evidence to the authorities triggered a series of events that no one could have foreseen. In the weeks that followed, the Miller mansion transformed into a fortress, with security guards patrolling the perimeter day and night. Arthur was in his study, reviewing documents, when the first sign of danger arrived. A plain brown envelope, with no return address, containing only a photograph of Clara playing in the garden and a chilling note. "We know what you're doing. Stop now, or the girl pays the price." His hands trembling, Arthur immediately summoned Robert and Sarah. Upon seeing the photograph, Robert paled. "They found us," he murmured, fear evident in his voice. "I knew this could happen." Sarah, ever pragmatic, was already on the phone with her contacts at the police department. "We need additional protection," she insisted. "This is no longer just a corporate investigation, it's a direct threat." As they discussed their next course of action, a scream echoed through the mansion. It was Nurse Susan's voice. "Help! Someone help!" Arthur and Robert raced towards the sound, their hearts pounding in their chests. They found Susan in the garden, holding Clara protectively. The girl was trembling, clinging to the nurse. "What happened?" Arthur demanded, looking around frantically. Susan, still breathless, replied, "A man, he tried to grab Clara. I fought him off, but he escaped through the back gate." Robert embraced his daughter, tears in his eyes. "It's okay now, my love. Daddy's here." Clara, still trembling, reached out for Arthur. "Arthur, are you here too?" The girl's simple gesture melted away any remaining tension between the two men. In that moment, they looked at each other, and a silent understanding passed between them. Their differences didn't matter now. Clara's safety was their only priority. In the days that followed, Arthur and Robert worked side by side, strengthening the mansion's security and delving deeper into the investigation. Sarah, tireless as ever, continued to unearth crucial evidence. One evening, as they were all gathered in the study, Sarah rushed in, a file clutched in her hand. "I found something," she announced, her eyes shining with excitement. "Bank transfer records linking Victor Thompson to high-ranking politicians. This goes way beyond Arthur's company." Before they could discuss the discovery, the sound of shattering glass echoed through the mansion. Arthur and Robert instantly jumped to their feet. "Stay here," Arthur ordered, grabbing a heavy object from his desk as a makeshift weapon. But before they could react, the study door burst open. Two masked men stormed into the room, guns drawn. "The files," one of them demanded. "Now!" Robert positioned himself protectively in front of Clara, while Arthur tried to buy them some time. "What files?" "We don't know what you're talking about." The second intruder pointed his gun directly at Clara. "Don't play games with us. We know what you've discovered. Hand everything over, or the girl suffers the consequences." Time seemed to stand still. Arthur looked at Robert, then at Sarah, who was clutching the precious files. Years of secrets, lies, and conspiracies had led to this moment. In a rapid flashback, Arthur saw himself years ago ignoring Elena's desperate warnings about the irregularities in the Aurora project. He saw Robert pleading for an investigation after his wife's disappearance, and he saw himself, blinded by ambition, pushing away those who tried to show him the truth. Snapping back to the present, Arthur made a decision. With a swift movement, he lunged at the nearest intruder, yelling for the others to run. Chaos erupted. Robert grabbed Clara, racing towards the secret exit that Arthur had installed weeks earlier. Sarah followed close behind, still clutching the vital files. In the hallway, they encountered more of the mansion's security guards, alerted by the commotion. Gunfire erupted, and in the midst of the chaos, Sarah was shot in the shoulder. "Go," she yelled at Robert, thrusting the files into his hands. "Protect Clara and this information." Robert hesitated for a moment, torn between helping Sarah and protecting his daughter. But Clara's frightened cries made him make the difficult decision to keep going. As they escaped through the secret passage, Arthur stayed behind, fighting to hold off the intruders and buy the others time. He knew he was risking everything, his life, his freedom, his empire, but for the first time in years, he felt he was doing the right thing. Hours later, at a safe house arranged by Arthur's trusted contacts, the group reunited. Sarah, her shoulder bandaged but as determined as ever, laid out her findings. "This goes way beyond simple corporate fraud," she explained. "We're dealing with a conspiracy involving politicians, military officials, and powerful businessmen." Elena only scratched the surface. Arthur and Robert exchanged glances, the gravity of the situation weighing heavily on them. Clara, exhausted by the day's events, slept soundly on a nearby couch. "What do we do now?" Robert asked, his voice betraying his weariness and fear. Arthur looked at the sleeping girl, then at Robert and Sarah. "We keep going," he said firmly. "For Elena's memory, for Clara's future, and to right the wrongs of the past. No matter the cost." Robert nodded slowly, extending his hand to Arthur. Together, then, as they shook hands, sealing an unlikely alliance, both men knew that the road ahead would be dangerous and uncertain. But with the truth as their compass and their love for Clara as their driving force, they were determined to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The night wore on, and with it, the promise of more dangers and revelations. But in that moment, united by a common purpose, they felt ready to face whatever fate had in store for them. Dawn found Arthur, Robert, and Sarah in a deserted warehouse on the outskirts of town. It was the chosen location for the final confrontation, where all the pieces of the puzzle would finally fall into place. Clara was safe in a secure location, under Nurse Susan's watchful eye. "Are you sure they'll come?" Robert asked, his voice tense. Arthur nodded grimly. "Victor won't resist the chance to cover his tracks once and for all." Sarah, her arm still bandaged from her recent injury, checked the hidden cameras they had installed. "Remember, we need clear confessions. It's our only chance to bring down the whole scheme." The sound of approaching cars put them on high alert. Moments later, Victor Thompson entered the warehouse, accompanied by two menacing-looking men. "Arthur, my old friend," Victor greeted with a chilling smile. "I see you've brought company. Mr. Baker. What an unpleasant surprise." Robert stepped forward, barely containing his rage. "Where's Elena? What did you do to my wife?" Victor laughed, a humorless sound. Elena, she's always so noble, so concerned with ethics. She simply didn't understand the game we were playing." "And what game was that, Victor?" Arthur asked, maintaining his composure. "Bribery? Fraud? Murder?" "Business, Arthur. Pure and simple business," Victor replied, his casual tone at odds with the gravity of his words. "The Aurora project was our golden ticket. Military contracts, political influence. Elena threatened all of that." As Victor spoke, Sarah discreetly activated the live feed to the authorities. Every incriminating word was being recorded. "So you killed her," Robert accused, his voice shaking with emotion. Victor shrugged. "Let's just say I took the necessary steps to protect our interests." At that moment, an unexpected sound echoed through the warehouse. Clara's voice. "I remember you." The girl's voice rang out through a hidden speaker. "Your voice. You were there that night." Victor paled, visibly shaken. "What is this?" "What kind of trick is this, sir?" Arthur smiled, a flicker of pride in his eyes. "No trick, Victor. It's the truth coming to light." Clara's voice continued. "You yelled at Mommy. You told her she should have kept quiet. And then there was a loud noise." Victor's face contorted into a mask of rage and panic. He pulled out a gun, waving it frantically between Arthur and Robert. "Shut that damn kid up. Don't you understand? I did what had to be done. The project, the company, everything depended on it." Robert lunged forward, blinded by rage, but Arthur held him back. "No, Robert, he's not worth it." Just then, sirens wailed in the distance, rapidly approaching. Victor, realizing he was cornered, made one last desperate attempt. He aimed at Arthur, his finger trembling on the trigger. "You should have stayed out of this, Arthur. You should have remained ignorant, like you always were." The shot echoed through the warehouse. Arthur closed his eyes, waiting for the pain, but it never came. Opening them, he saw Robert standing in front of him, having pushed him out of the bullet's path. Before Victor could fire again, the police stormed the warehouse. Within seconds, Victor and his accomplices were disarmed and handcuffed. As the officers read Victor his rights, he looked at Arthur, his expression a mixture of contempt and defeat. "You don't understand, do you? Elena was just the beginning. There are much more powerful people involved in this." Arthur felt a wave of dizziness wash over him, the stress of the past few days finally taking its toll. He stumbled, leaning against a nearby wall. Robert, noticing Arthur's pallor, rushed to his side. "Arthur, what's wrong?" "It's nothing," Arthur murmured, but his body betrayed him. He collapsed, Robert barely managing to catch him. "We need a medic here," Robert yelled, his voice filled with genuine concern. As paramedics rushed to Arthur's aid, Robert held his hand, years of resentment dissolving in the face of the fear of losing the man who, despite everything, had become an ally and perhaps a friend. "Hang in there, Arthur," Robert murmured. "Clara needs both of us now." Hours later, in a hospital room, Arthur opened his eyes to find Robert sitting by his side. The diagnosis had been extreme stress, exhaustion and high blood pressure, but with rest and care he would recover. "Robert," Arthur began, his voice hoarse, "I'm sorry for everything." Robert shook his head, a small smile playing on his lips. "No, Arthur, I'm the one who's sorry. For so long I blamed you for everything. But now I see that we were all pawns in a much bigger game. Elena would be proud of you," Arthur said softly, "of the father you've become to Clara, of your determination to seek the truth." Tears glistened in Robert's eyes. "She'd be proud of both of us for finally doing the right thing." At that moment, the door to the room opened and Clara entered, guided by Sarah. The girl rushed to the bedside, her hands finding Arthur's and Robert's. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. "We are, sweetheart," Robert replied, his voice thick with emotion. "And thanks to you, we got justice for your mother." Arthur gently squeezed Clara's hand. "You were very brave, Clara. Your mother would be so proud." As Clara smiled, hugging the two men who had become her family, Arthur and Robert exchanged a look of mutual understanding. The road ahead would still be challenging, with more truths to uncover and wounds to heal. But in that moment, united by their love for Clara and the memory of Elena, they knew they would face the future together, as an unlikely but undeniably strong family. The hospital room was quiet, save for the steady beeping of the heart monitor. Arthur Miller, the once powerful business tycoon, now appeared frail against the crisp white sheets. Dr. Carter, a renowned cardiologist, entered the room followed by Robert and Clara. "Mr. Miller," the doctor began, his tone serious but not without hope, "the tests have revealed a serious heart condition. The stress of recent events has exacerbated a pre-existing issue. However, with proper treatment and significant lifestyle changes, it's entirely manageable." Arthur nodded slowly, absorbing the information. His gaze drifted to Clara, who held Robert's hand tightly. "How long for recovery, Doctor?" "A few months at minimum," Dr. Carter replied. "You'll need complete rest for the next several weeks." Robert stepped forward, his expression a mix of concern and determination. "Don't worry about the company, Arthur. I'll take over temporarily, if you trust me." The offer surprised Arthur. Just weeks ago, the idea of Robert running his company would have been unthinkable. Now it felt like the most natural thing in the world. "I do trust you, Robert," Arthur replied, a small smile gracing his lips. "The company couldn't be in better hands." Clara, sensing the significance of the moment, squeezed both men's hands. "You're going to work together now." Her innocent comment brought smiles to both Arthur and Robert's faces. "Yes, sweetheart," Robert replied. "We're going to work together to make things better." In the weeks that followed, a remarkable transformation took place. Robert immersed himself in running the company, bringing a fresh perspective and ethical approach that had long been missing. He implemented transparency policies and initiated a full audit to cleanse the remnants of corruption left by Victor and his associates. Meanwhile, Sarah worked tirelessly on the legal aspects of Clara's situation. She met with Arthur and Robert at the hospital to discuss the girl's future. "Legally, the situation is complex," Sarah explained. Robert is the biological father, but Arthur has been Clara's de facto guardian for the past few months. Given the extraordinary circumstances, I'm proposing joint custody. Arthur and Robert exchanged glances, years of animosity replaced by a shared understanding. I think that's the best solution, Robert said finally. Clara needs both of us in her life. Arthur nodded in agreement. She's brought us together in a way I never thought possible. While the adults discussed the legal details, Clara played quietly in the corner of the room. Her resilience and joy, despite everything she had endured, was a constant source of inspiration for everyone. It was during one of these visits that Dr. Carter brought surprising news. I've been in contact with a colleague, an ophthalmologist, he began, capturing everyone's attention. He mentioned an experimental procedure that could potentially restore Clara's sight. The news hit the room like a bombshell. Robert was the first to recover from the shock. Is it safe? What are the risks? It's a new procedure, the doctor admitted, but the preliminary results are promising. And after reviewing Clara's case, my colleague believes she would be an ideal candidate. Arthur and Robert looked at Clara, who had stopped playing and was listening intently. Clara, Arthur said softly, what do you think about this? It's a big decision, and we want you to be a part of it. The girl was silent for a moment, considering. Could I see you? She asked finally, her voice filled with hope. There's a possibility. Yes, Robert replied, his voice choked with emotion. Then I want to try, Clara said with determination. In the days that followed, Arthur and Robert immersed themselves in research about the procedure, consulting with specialists and discussing the pros and cons. It was the first time they had truly worked together as a team, united by their concern for Clara's well-being. Meanwhile, at the company, Robert was implementing significant changes. He established a robust ethics department, initiated social responsibility programs, and refocused the company's efforts on technologies that truly benefited society. One afternoon, while Arthur was recovering at home, Robert visited him with a surprising proposal. I've been thinking, he began, and I think we should rename the company. Something that symbolizes our new direction and values. Arthur looked at him curiously. What do you have in mind? How about Renewed Aurora? Robert suggested, in honor of the project that started all of this, but with a new meaning, a new dawn for all of us. Arthur felt tears welling up in his eyes. It's perfect, Robert. Elena would have approved. The mention of Elena brought a moment of reflective silence between them. Her loss still stung, but now there was also a sense of purpose, of honoring her memory through their actions. Weeks turned into months. Arthur's health gradually improved, and he began to take a more active role in the company's decisions, working in harmony with Robert. Renewed Aurora quickly gained a reputation as a leader in ethical practices and responsible innovation. Finally, the day of Clara's surgery arrived. Arthur and Robert waited anxiously outside the operating room, their past differences completely forgotten in the face of their shared concern. Hours passed before the surgeon emerged, a tired but satisfied smile on his face. The surgery was a success, he announced. Now we can only wait and see how she responds in the next few days. A week later, with Clara sufficiently recovered, the moment arrived to remove the bandages. Arthur and Robert stood by her side, holding her hands. Slowly, the doctor unwrapped the bandages. Clara blinked several times, her eyes adjusting to the light for the first time in years. "Daddy!" she called out, turning to Robert. Tears streamed down his face as he nodded. Then she turned to the other side. "Arthur, I'm here, sweetheart," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. A radiant smile lit up Clara's face. "I can see you. Both of you." In that moment, embraced, Arthur, Robert, and Clara weren't just three individuals brought together by extraordinary circumstances. They were a family, forged through pain, redemption, and finally, love. As Clara gazed in wonder at the world around her, Arthur and Robert exchanged looks of profound gratitude and mutual understanding. The future, once so uncertain and bleak, now shimmered with possibilities. Together they would face any challenge that came their way, stronger in their unlikely but undeniably powerful union. The hospital buzzed with nervous energy on the morning of Clara's surgery. Arthur, now recovered from his heart condition, paced the waiting room while Robert held his daughter's hand tightly. "It's okay to be scared, sweetheart," Robert whispered, kissing Clara's forehead. The girl smiled bravely. "I'm not scared, Daddy. You and Arthur are here with me." Arthur approached, kneeling beside the bed. "Remember, Clara, no matter the outcome, we love you just the way you are." At that moment, Dr. Lee, the ophthalmologic surgeon, entered the room. "We're ready. Clara, are you prepared for your big adventure?" With a final hug for both her fathers, Clara was wheeled into the operating room, leaving Arthur and Robert in a silence filled with hope and apprehension. As they waited, Arthur reflected on the changes of the past few months. Renewed Aurora, as the company was now called, was thriving under his and Robert's joint leadership. They had implemented strict ethical policies, invested in groundbreaking medical research, and established social responsibility programs that were transforming lives. "You know," Arthur began, breaking the silence, "I never imagined we'd be here side by side like family." Robert smiled, the weariness and worry evident in his eyes. "Life has a funny way of surprising us, doesn't it? Elena always used to say that." The mention of Elena brought a moment of quiet reflection. Her presence, though physically absent, seemed to hover over them, guiding them on this unexpected journey. The hours dragged on. Each time the door opened, both men would rise, hoping for news. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Dr. Lee emerged, his face unreadable. "The surgery was a success," he announced, a tired smile forming. "Now, we can only wait and see how she responds in the next few days." The following days were a roller coaster of emotions. Clara, her eyes still bandaged, oscillated between moments of infectious optimism and periods of pain and discomfort. Arthur and Robert took turns by her side, reading stories, singing lullabies, and simply holding her hand. A week after the surgery, the moment they had both longed for and dreaded arrived. The removal of the bandages. The hospital room was silent, save for the soft sound of Clara's breathing. Dr. Lee began to carefully remove the bandages, layer by layer. "Now, Clara," he instructed gently, "when I say so, I want you to open your eyes slowly." The light might be intense at first. Arthur and Robert held their breath, their hands intertwined with Clara's. "Ready?" the doctor asked. "You can open your eyes now." Slowly, hesitantly, Clara opened her eyes. For an agonizing moment, she blinked repeatedly, her eyes adjusting to the light for the first time in years. "I can see," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Then, louder, "I can see." Tears streamed down Arthur and Robert's faces as they watched Clara gaze in wonder at her surroundings, her eyes wide with amazement. "Daddy!" she called out, turning to Robert. Her face lit up with recognition. "I remember you. Your smile. It's just like I dreamed." Then she turned to Arthur. For a moment she studied him intently, a puzzled expression on her face. Suddenly, her eyes widened. "Wait," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. I remember you too. Not from now, but from before." Arthur and Robert exchanged surprised glances. "What do you remember, sweetheart?" Robert asked softly. Clara closed her eyes, concentrating. It was dark. Mommy was crying. There were loud voices. And then you came in. She pointed to Arthur. "You hugged Mommy. You said everything would be all right." The revelation hit Arthur like a thunderbolt. The long-suppressed memory came flooding back. "Elena came to me that night," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "She was scared, saying she'd discovered something terrible. I promised I'd help her, that we'd do the right thing together. But then Victor showed up." Robert finished, comprehension dawning in his eyes. "He must have followed us." Clara nodded vigorously. "Yes, the bad man. He yelled at Mommy and you, Arthur. He said you were ruining everything." The pieces of the puzzle finally clicked into place. Elena hadn't simply disappeared. She had been silenced when she tried to do the right thing, with Arthur by her side. "She left something for you, Clara," Arthur said softly, remembering a crucial detail. "The locket. She must have hidden something inside it." With trembling hands, Robert retrieved the locket that Clara always wore. Carefully, he opened it, revealing not just the familiar picture of Eleanor, but also a tiny hidden compartment. Inside, there was a minuscule memory card. "The evidence," Robert whispered. Elena managed to save the evidence. The room fell silent for a moment, the weight of the revelation hanging heavy in the air. Elena, even in her final moments, had found a way to protect the truth and her daughter. Clara looked from Arthur to Robert, her newly healed eyes shining with tears and understanding. "Mommy knew you would both protect me, that you would find the truth together." In that moment, embraced, Arthur, Robert, and Clara weren't just three individuals brought together by extraordinary circumstances. They were a family, forged through pain, redemption, and finally, love. "What do we do now?" Robert asked, looking at the tiny memory card that held Elena's last words. Arthur took a deep breath, renewed determination in his eyes. "We honor Elena's memory. We use this evidence to ensure justice is served. And most importantly," he smiled at Clara, "we build the future that Elena dreamed of for her daughter." As the sun began to set outside the hospital window, casting a golden glow over the room, the unlikely family held each other tighter. The road ahead would still be challenging, with more truths to be revealed and obstacles to overcome. But now, united by love, truth, and the memory of Elena, they were ready to face whatever the future held. This wasn't an ending, they realized. It was truly a new beginning. 6 months had passed since that transformative day at the hospital. The Miller mansion, once a symbol of solitary power, now pulsed with life and laughter. In the garden, under the warm summer sun, an unusual scene unfolded. Arthur, sporting sunglasses and a floral shirt, a far cry from his former impeccably tailored suits, adjusted a colorful banner that read, "Happy Birthday, Clara." Robert, meanwhile, wrestled with a cluster of unruly balloons, his carefree laughter echoing through the air. Suddenly, the birthday girl appeared, her eyes sparkling with a mix of excitement and the still new wonder of sight. Clara, now with partially restored vision, absorbed every detail of the world around her with infectious joy. "Daddy! Arthur! It's all so beautiful!" she exclaimed, twirling around to admire the decorations. Robert scooped her up in his arms, planting a kiss on her cheek. "Only the best for our special girl." Arthur approached, joining the embrace. "Happy birthday, sweetheart. We're so proud of you." The party soon filled with guests. Sarah arrived, carrying a large present and a warm smile. She had become more than just a social worker. She was a dear friend of the family, a constant reminder of the extraordinary journey they had all taken. As Clara played with the other children, Arthur and Robert watched from the porch, a moment of quiet reflection passing between them. "Can you believe we're here?" Robert asked softly. Arthur shook his head, a smile playing on his lips. "Never. But I'm grateful for every moment, even the difficult ones." Renewed Aurora had become a shining example of ethical business practices and responsible innovation under their joint leadership. The evidence left by Elena had not only brought justice but also inspired a complete transformation in corporate culture. Sarah joined them, her gaze sweeping over the festive scene. "Elena would be so proud," she said quietly. The three stood in silence for a moment, honoring the memory of the woman who, even in death, had guided them on this journey of redemption and love. The moment was broken by Clara, who ran up to them, her eyes shining with excitement. "Come on. It's time for cake." As everyone gathered around the table, Clara at the center, surrounded by her unconventional but loving family, Arthur felt a wave of emotion wash over him. "Before we sing," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I'd like to say a few words." Everyone turned to him expectantly. "A year ago, I was a different man. Lonely, focused only on material success. But then, on a rainy night, a little girl came into my life and changed everything." He smiled at Clara. "Through her, I found not only a family, but also redemption. I learned about forgiveness, about second chances, and about the transformative power of love." Robert placed a hand on Arthur's shoulder, a gesture of solidarity and mutual understanding. "Elena left us a precious gift, Arthur continued. Not just Clara, but also the chance to do the right thing, to correct the mistakes of the past. Every day is a new opportunity to honor her memory, to be better. Clara, tears in her eyes, hugged Arthur and Robert. "Mommy's here with us," she said softly. "I can feel it." As the candles were lit and the birthday song began, the air was filled not only with joy but also with hope. Hope for the future, for new possibilities, for the enduring power of love and redemption. And so, under the twilight sky, with laughter and tears of joy, this unique family celebrated not just a birthday, but the miracle of second chances and the infinite power of love to heal, transform, and unite.